Evening all. Appreciate everybody being here this evening. We'll be on page 34 of the lesson material in Proverbs. If you need material, I do have some extra. Happy to pass that around to anybody that needs it. Sorry. So I'll, just one? Okay. He is. So I'll be taking tonight's class in Dad's absence, so try to help me keep it on the rails. This is all be online. I'll be responsible for this, so try to help me keep it on the rails. We'll do the best we can. Talk about friendships tonight, and so some pretty interesting thoughts. Certainly hope you've had time to look over some of these questions and can help me square the circle on some of these questions a little bit. Before we get started, Brother Don, do you mind to lead us in a word of prayer?
God and Father in heaven, grateful to you to give us another day, forever. We have this opportunity to come together as your children, study your word, know better how that we might please you, how we might be the servants that you would have us to be. Pray for all the teachers this evening. Pray for what you do with Michael. Help us to gain the most that we can from this study. Thank you for every blessing that you give us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I was grateful to have the chance to do this study. There's some things in here that I probably hadn't thought about, and one in particular that I'm going to highlight outside the book of Proverbs that I thought was fascinating as we talk about friendship, which is probably not something we spend a lot of time talking about. We talk about, brotherly love. We talk about marriage relationships, but how often do we talk about friendship? So Proverbs has quite a bit to say about that. I'm going to tackle this a little differently than Dad does. I hope everybody's okay with that. We're going to go right to question one. We're not going to wait for the bell to start the questions. We're going to dive right in, baby. We're going to see if we can answer these questions. So, somebody help me with question number one. How would you describe a real friend? And feel free to use any of our Proverbs references if you'd like to do that, or just kind of give me in your own words. That's probably something we throw around. I've probably said that. He's a real friend, she's a real friend, but I don't know that I've ever defined it. So somebody give me some of the characteristics there.
Somebody that's with you through thick and thin.
Through thick and thin. I think you can definitely see that in Proverbs, right? And so, based on what Wanda said there, let's skip around to a couple of these verses. It's pretty interesting. Proverbs 17 and verse 17. I think this would be the one that would go along with Wanda's through thick and thin. If I could read that.
A friend loves at all times and a brother is born for adversity.
Loves at all times and is born for adversity. Somebody help me with what that means.
We've got friends that are put in their lives seemingly for sole purpose to get us through whatever junk we're going through.
Yeah. Pretty remarkable, right? Pretty providential in my life if you kind of look back at the people. Yeah, you experience all the good stuff, right? You experience all the fun and all the good stuff, but the brother born for adversity. Somebody give me a practical example of that. What's a brother born for adversity? What does that mean? Yes. Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's really cool. So there's different versions of that story told a lot of places, right? Brothers and sisters born for adversity. What other thoughts about that? Through thick and thin. What does that mean? Yes. Yes. Yes, likes you when you're not so good, Miss Carol says. I think that's a pretty apt description. I think I fit that at times. So through thick and thin, right? And in the New Testament, that idea of rejoicing with those that rejoice and weep with those that weep, right? Friends are on both sides of that equation. So no question, friends are friends through thick and thin. So I think Wanda started us on the right track there. Any other thoughts about that particular verse or that thought? All right, now let's look at one more aspect of thick and thin. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 19. And let's read verse 4. Somebody care to read that when you have it? So, according to the proverb writer, making friends is pretty easy. Just get rich. You can have all the friends you want. So, what help me here? What's that got to do with Wanda's comment about thick and thin? The thin, the herd tends to thin out, doesn't it? Any New Testament precedent for that anybody can think of? Job's friends turned out to be not that excellent in times of adversity. That's a good one I hadn't thought of. Yes. Yes. Fair weather friends. And why do we call them fair weather friends? Yes. I had a note on the prodigal son. We won't take the time to go read those verses, but this proverb would have suited him well, right? He had some friends in the good weather, and the weather turned. And he looked around. He's hanging out with the swine. Probably figurative as well as literal, probably in some cases. But so that's true. What else do you make of this verse? Let's go on and read verses 6 and 7. Same chapter, Proverbs 19, 6 and 7. They care to read those passages?
Many will seek the favor of a generous man, and every man is a friend to him who gives gifts. All the brothers of the poor man hate him. How much more do his friends obey him? He pursues them with words, but they're gone.
Oh, man, that sounds pretty depressing. Solomon here, that's pretty depressing. If I lose my money, all y'all gonna disappear. Is what it sounds like. So what do we learn about what a true friend is from those verses? Yeah. I think we've run across this a few times in Proverbs where Solomon tells us the way something is, even if we don't like it, right? Even if we don't necessarily wish that's the way it was. These are like truths. These are eternal facts he's laying before us, even if we don't like them, even if we wish they didn't represent the truth. But this is one of them. All the poor man's brothers hate him, and his friends go far from him. Solomon didn't say that because he liked it. I don't think he said it because that's how he wanted us to act. He said it because that's kind of what happens. That this is how the world reacts. So why does the world react that way?
The world generally is focused on self.
Yeah. And
I
then
have something to offer me because I don't want to spend time with you.
yes. And in the world, a lot of what the world calls friendships are very transactional, right? They're very transactional. I am friends with you because you provide this for me, and when you can no longer provide that for me, the reason for our friendship kind of erodes, and what are we left with? So Solomon lays that out in front of us. So contrast that with question 1. Contrast that with a real friend. How do we make sure that our friends are not based on something that's so easily eroded?
Get poor.
All right, is there a plan B? How do we? That's a good answer. How do we? He said, "Get poor." By the way, if you didn't hear him, surely there's a better way to test for such a thing. How do we make sure that our friendships aren't based on something like that can disappear?
Look at what we look for in friends. I mean, are we always looking for the people who make us feel good and that sort of thing? Or are we searching out relationships where we can like breathe life into people and where we can provide something to them? I mean, part of this is if we approach friendship selfishly,
Yes.
this transactional thing,
Yes.
then we're going to find that we're the type of friend who's looking for those sorts of things. And we're the very real friends.
Ooh.
We have to be the real friend if we want true friendships.
All right. And so what do I need to be providing instead? Yeah. Let's look at one more. Proverbs 27. So I think I was looking up this verse because I thought Jason's comment there was very interesting. I mean, what we're looking for is for friendship is just make sure that I leave here feeling good about myself all the time, right? If that's what we're here for, if that's the transaction that I'm getting, I just tell me what I'm doing is okay, right? 27, 5, and 6.
Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy.
Faithful are the wounds of a friend, and profuse are the kisses of an enemy. I think the world would probably say that faithful are the kisses of a friend, and profuse are the wounds of an enemy. Proverbs, as they often do, kind of turn that on its head. So I think we all understand that, but flesh it out for me. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. What does that mean?
A true friend's going to take you like it is
Yes.
in a loving way.
Tell it like it is in a loving way.
Get you
Yeah.
to be better.
And both sides of that sentence are very important, right? Not having the courage to tell it like it is wouldn't fall into this answer to question 1, but then not doing it in a loving way also wouldn't fall into this answer to question 1. Both sides of that sentence are so important. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. What other thoughts or examples would you toss on there?
Michael, it takes, we moved around a lot, it takes a lot of time invested to make a friend.
Yes.
I mean, we know all of these, we move places with friends,
Yeah.
but to really to learn people and develop a relationship, it really takes a lot of time to invest in to have true friends.
That is a really great point. Yeah, you can't have old new friends, right? Or new old friends. How's that go? You can't have new old friends. And Judy used the word invest, which I think is an interesting word. That you got to invest some time in those relationships before you get to a real friendship. Now, you can have friends and those things develop over time, but that real answer, I think we're saying that it requires some investment. Which is an interesting thought. Maybe not the way we think about friendship, but something that requires some investment on our part, right? Not just to Jason's point, not that we're asking somebody to pour into us, but we're going to have to invest ourselves. That's a really, really good comment. Thank you. Anything else on the wounds of a friend?
Maybe a bit of a James 5 thing, 19:20.
Yes, go for it.
Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one converts him, let him know that he which converts the sinner from the error of his way shall save the soul from death, and hide a multitude of sins. And you got Galatians 6 in there with love and consider yourself and all that.
Yes.
We call that hurts.
Yes.
There's purpose for it.
Yes.
To save and to restore on the back end instead of deal with just being totally lost or just physically worse off.
Yeah. I'm literally probably the least confrontational person that you'll ever meet. I don't know. Dad's not here, so at least one in the room anyway. But it's wounds. It doesn't say the wounds of a friend don't hurt, right? I think that, to your point, they do. It says they're faithful. So why are wounds of a friend faithful? They still hurt.
Because they care about you.
Yeah.
Develop that relationship that they care about you.
Yes.
And you're going to get past that wound.
Yes.
I think it displays agape love, because it's agape love is doing what's right all the time.
Yes.
What
Yes. All right, my favorite verse in Proverbs. I held off, how many minutes? Gosh, I held off 10 minutes before I got to it. 15 minutes. 27:17. Proverbs 27:17.
Iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen the countenance.
He wasn't even looking at his Bible, ladies and gentlemen. That was and I seem to remember a whole series of lessons on this topic. So iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Somebody help me put that into words we can take to the street. What does that mean? Yes. Yes. Courage to talk, be able to, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
And that's what I think about. You're telling your friend in a kind way how to keep them on the straight and narrow.
Yes.
And that part of their life flakes away,
Mhm.
like the iron sharpening a knife.
Yes. Very well said. There is friction in that process. It just is. Frictionless friends probably aren't doing us very much good. Would be the next point of that comment, right? If his friends that are just whatever we say, whatever we do, just greases by. So if we're truly here to make each other better, that's kind of the whole point of this exercise of being friends. If we're here to make each other better, it's going to require at times, hopefully it's not every conversation, but it's going to require at times a little friction in order for our iron to be sharpened. So try to remember that. Should help us take criticism with grace. That this is kind of what we're doing here. We're trying to make each other better, trying to sharpen each other. Love that verse. Other thoughts on iron sharpening iron? Yes. Yeah, holding each other accountable. That's a great phrase. That we should have high expectations of one another as brethren, right? And that doesn't mean that we don't approach every conversation with grace, but it does mean that there's some accountability. We don't expect the least out of one another. That we do hold each other accountable with grace. It's good thought. Good thought. Other thoughts? Yes, sir.
I was wondering how many truly friends a person would have at any one given time.
Good question. Wendell wants to go. Let's go down. That's a great question, Wendell. Let's go down to number 5. And I think it kind of speaks to Wendell's question. Wendell said, if you couldn't hear him, I wonder how many true friends, as we just defined, you would have at any given time. Good question. Question number 5. So I'm going to put a pin in that, Wendell. I'm going to come back to it. Question 5 says, which is better, many friends or a few real friends? And then why? So hit me with that answer first.
I think it depends on what you're looking for.
Okay?
If you're ate up and consumed about Facebook thumb ups, comments, and accolades.
I can tell you're not on there much because they're likes.
Okay.
Thumb ups. I love it.
But if I'm looking for numbers,
Yes.
then I want a lot of raking everybody.
Yes.
Throw whatever gets their attention.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for devotion and sincerity, it's hard to get that.
Yeah.
Those things have to be earned at that time.
Investment.
Somebody said investment, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. Miss Rhonda? Ooh, that's a good thought. So So Rhonda would say you can have a lot of real friends if you're willing to be a real friend to a lot of people. Was her thought. I think that's probably good consideration here. So there's probably a lot of work done in this sentence by the word real. Would you rather have a few friends, and I almost put that one in quotes. I think that's the way the author intended this. Would you rather have a few friends, a few Facebook likes, or would you rather have many friends or a few real friends? I think the point of that question is it quantity or quality? I think to Sam's point, you can find the quantity, but quality is maybe a little harder to find. Any other thoughts on how anybody answered that question?
I was looking at chapter 18, verse 24.
Yep. Go for it.
Definitely right there. A man of too many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother.
Okay. Interpret that for us.
I'll try. So, if we're like Sam, well, no, I'm not saying we're like Sam. My bad. If we're like the person Sam was describing, one after, I mean, that's such a fickle thing that doesn't last, and it would bring about our ruin because we're chasing something that's not really real.
Yes.
It doesn't have any substance to it.
Yes.
But if we can find, I like the contrast here. I guess it was on purpose that he said, many friends versus there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother.
Yes.
It's like,
By the way, I'm sorry, I didn't repeat that. That's 18:24, if anybody didn't hear that verse reference, which is a great one. Sorry, keep going.
yeah, but it's just that when times get tough, things happen. Usually the false friends will scatter and that sort of thing, but the ones who are really there for you, thick and thin and all that,
Yes.
they're going to stick and they're going to be there.
Yes. Okay, so hard question I'm not sure there's an answer to, but just throw the landmine out, see who's willing to step on it. So tell me the difference between a group of real friends and a clique. Okay.
Another real friend to that group, and the willingness to reach out to other people as well. You can't passively gain true friends,
Ooh,
real friends.
well said.
You have to put in the effort yourself. If you sit there fully expecting other people to reach out to you, they may a couple times, but unless you reciprocate that and also reach out, you're not going to gain real friends. But the difference would be in a group of friends and a clique would be their willingness to reach out. And like if somebody reaches into the group, they're willing to also,
Yeah.
Reciprocate that.
Well said. It's a good thought. And I think it speaks to what Rhonda said also. Yes.
I always think of a clique as a group that just likes to go out and hang out. But you might have true friends within that clique.
Hmm.
But I don't see that everybody are true friends. I think they're just like a hangout group.
Yes.
You get together and you like to go out to eat and you like to talk and the men, your husbands always have somebody that they can always talk to, and girlfriend,
Yeah.
wives always have somebody. But I don't consider them as, close friends.
Yeah.
But there may be some within that clique that are true friends. You see what I'm saying? They
Mhm.
take the time to see each other outside of getting together and eating out or watching a ball game.
Yeah.
I think those are like passive friends, where a true friend.
Active to her point. Yeah. Well said.
Whenever I've heard, I'm sorry.
No, please.
Whenever I've heard the word clique ever used, I've never heard the word clique used in a positive way.
Yeah.
It's when someone uses the word clique, and I've heard it in churches, and other areas, and they generally don't let anybody in.
Something exclusive about it.
It's an exclusive group. You're not invited.
Yeah.
You're not to get in here.
Yeah.
But it's never been
Yeah. I think I agree. I don't, and I'm not sure that if we look definitionally, it may not be that way, but the connotation of it, but I think there's something about the exclusivity of it. Yes.
Well, I was just thinking, I wonder if sometimes we don't use the word friends instead of maybe we should use the word acquaintances.
Yeah. Companion. Yeah.
There's a difference
Yes.
between friendship and acquaintance.
Maybe we cheapen the word friend if we kind of throw it around a little too often. Yeah. Good thought. Good thought.
What do you think about, could your best friend be a non-Christian versus a Christian?
Yeah. So, okay, Wendell's got another landmine out here. We're going to dance around it. Can you be a real friend? Can you be a best friend as defined here with somebody who's not a believer? Yes. Okay. So how do you close the gap? Yes.
Be kind to them and do things for them and everything. And I think kindness and soft words does more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of long-term patient. And there's going to be conflict, right? I mean, that's going to, just the nature of different beliefs is going to create conflict. Are you patient and loving enough to work through those? That takes a real friend, right? That's good feedback. Other points of view on that?
I wouldn't disagree with that, but 1 Corinthians 15:33, that's word caution.
Yeah.
Be not deceived, evil communications corrupt good manners. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, you may have to be a little flexible with evil communications.
Yeah.
But if it's not a non-Christian, then there's definite difference there.
Yeah.
So, but be not deceived. I mean, if that's your best friend, you spend lots of time hanging out, and whether you're influencing them, iron sharpens iron. It works both ways. It always does.
Sure.
So we have to be cautious with that.
Yep. Both good.
That's all I got to say.
Yeah, good points of view.
Just a word caution.
Yeah, good points of view. Yeah. Yeah.
So you can be married to the non-Christian,
Yes.
and you have to be best friends.
Yes.
So, I mean, can you have a best friend that's not a Christian? Of course
Yes.
you can. You can be married to them.
Yes.
So it just, but not all non-Christians are equal.
Sure. Of course. Yeah. No, I think that's a good word. Good thought. Now, again, there's going to be some conflicts arrive in that relationship just because the nature of where you're at. But what is it? First Peter 3. That maybe one without a word by the conduct of her wife. I think kind of speaks to what you're saying there. That iron was definitely being sharpened, even if he didn't know it at the time. That's probably fits in the context. Good conversation. Okay, we're almost through question 1. Somebody give me another characteristic of a real friend. I got a couple more. Anybody have any other characteristics or thoughts about what a real friend is? All right, I'll play first. So here's a couple of thoughts. You probably don't have a real friend unless you can have a vulnerability and intimacy. You can just say whatever's on your heart, right? That if you can't just kind of be yourself and say what you really think, do you really have a real friend? That's probably one I was thinking about. And you better have a friend that's going to hold you accountable when what you really think is trash. That's the other part of that, right? So if we're going to be intimate and vulnerable and say what's really on our heart, sometimes we need somebody to call us on that. So that certainly fits in there.
I think if you don't think like I think, you're not my friend.
So,
That's the way it seems to be, sure enough.
yeah,
Differences makes for good companions.
yes,
sometimes.
yes,
They support each other.
yes, Yeah, I don't think it's, I'm sorry, I cut you off back here.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, what I would consider a real friend, you shouldn't have to say, don't repeat this. I'm talking about if I was sitting there,
Sure.
disclosing something.
Sure.
Something personal about myself, something I'm struggling with.
Correct.
Something from the past or whatever.
Oh, that's a great point.
I shouldn't have to say,
You're not going to tell anybody.
that
Yeah.
to yourself.
Yes.
But you do find yourself, and then I think when they think it's okay to like mention it to a spouse or mention it to certain people, I think that's wrong
Yes.
to do that.
So I'm going to go to, that's a great point. Let's go to Proverbs 25. And I would argue that what is talked about here in Proverbs 25 fits seamlessly with how Jesus told us to handle our disputes in the book of Matthew. So Proverbs 25, verses 8 through 10. Somebody care to read those verses for me?
Do not go hastily to court, for what will you do in the end when your neighbor has put you to shame? Debate your case with your neighbor and do not disclose the secret to another, lest he who hears it expose your shame and your reputation be ruined.
Yes. So how are we supposed to handle those issues with our friend, with our neighbor? According to this passage. One-on-one. Yeah, one-on-one, right? I think Jesus would give us very similar guidance about when we have an issue with a brother. Did you have a thought?
Another characteristic would be it's not easily shaken.
Yes.
So, if you're having a bad day and you're maybe not as friendly, it's not been like, oh, I can't be friends with her now because she is mean.
Yeah.
Like, they give you the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Somebody else saying something bad about you is not going to make them not want to be your friend because they know you. It's not easily broken.
I think it's well said. Not easily offended, not easily broken.
Yeah, but, if there's a lot of things, it can be.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I think those are excellent thoughts. Let's go down, and I think this kind of goes to what we've been talking about. Down to question 8. Why do friends conceal each other's mistakes? And that references Proverbs 17 and verse 9. I'll read that one quickly. Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends. I think that fits in with what Ms. Rita was saying. Friends, we don't have to worry about friends, as it says here, repeating a matter. That's kind of what makes them friends, right? We know they can be trustworthy with those things. So the answer to that question, why do friends conceal each other's mistakes? Okay, because we don't gossip. That's a great answer. Yes? Sometimes they know too much. What does that mean?
He who is without sin casts the first stone.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, you're not going to tell because they're going to tell something on you, huh? That kind of thing.
if you give each other the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And also, you have a lot of grace with each other.
Absolutely.
And so, but they know a lot about you too, and so they know that you struggled with X, and now they're struggling, and so you help each other, but also have a lot of grace.
Yes. No, I think that's true. And I kind of circled the word conceal. I don't know that that's the right word to talk about. This is not like it's some conspiracy. I mean, it's not our business. Like I'm not concealing, government secrets because it's not my business. I don't know why that's not concealing if it's not my business. I thought Proverbs 28:13 kind of fit in this context. So 28:13, somebody care to read that? Brian, you got it?
He who conceals his transgressions will not prosper,
So concealing transgressions is not our goal here. Like Proverbs tells us concealing transgressions is a no-no. That's not what we're after. But the rest of that verse says, he who confesses and forsakes them will obtain mercy. So we're not concealing somebody else's mistakes. We're just letting them handle their business, right? That's a little different thing. And by the way, also in that verse, when we talk about don't conceal a transgression but confess it, who do we think they're confessing to? Most of the time. God for sure. I would argue lots of times it's also a friend. And so again, what is our expectation there? Certainly confessing to God, but on earth also confessing to friends. And I think the expectation would be not that the friend is concealing it, but they're providing an answer to this Proverbs 28:13.
In chapter 17, that verse that does say conceal, I think the opposite there in that verse is repeating it.
Yes.
And I think the implication is to others as well. And it's sort of like spraying that around. And it really just doesn't help throwing your past back up at you.
Yeah.
That doesn't help.
Yeah.
So I think it's not conceal as in hide it, let's pretend like it never happened, but
Right.
more so bring it up.
Right. Well said. Thank you.
And to that point, I mean, what Jason said, what Brian said earlier, it's a conflict.
Yeah.
Well, this is your best interest. I'm not gonna tell everything I know.
Yeah.
Well, who's that gonna do? I mean, the problem's there, let's work it out together. Instead of bring all these other folks in and make it worse.
So you stole my thunder on this with that comment, but I think it's interesting as we've gone through our conversation here. If you go to 1 Corinthians 13 and look at the characteristics of love, all those would fit into this answer to question one: what are the characteristics of a friend? I think that speaks to what Brian and Sam have both said, that the characteristics of love and the characteristic of a friend, they track pretty well. What if we just substituted? A friend is patient, a friend is kind, a friend does not envy or boast, a friend is not arrogant, a friend is not rude, a friend does not insist on their own way, a friend is not irritable or resentful, a friend does not rejoice at wrongdoing, a friend bears all things and believes all things and hopes all things and endures all things. Like those all fit, right? We would all kind of agree, and it's probably a pretty good definition. So anyway, I think it's interesting how those things track. Any other thoughts or comments on that? Yes.
I was thinking too, a real friend would protect your character.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
You know, truthfully.
Sure.
Protect worthy.
Yes.
You know.
What character you have needs to be protected, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I've been in situations where you overhear someone talking about somebody, and you just know it's not true.
Yeah.
A real friend will protect you in your character.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Definitely fits into that. Other thoughts on what a real friend is?
Negative side of having good friends is they pass away
Yes.
or they move away
Yeah.
and you lose them and don't have contact.
Yes.
It hurts both of you.
Yes. Losing friends is hard. That's a great point. I hadn't fleshed that one out, but for the same reason that losing someone we love, right? That's what it is. If love is in friendship or parallel in that way, losing friends should be hard. That's a really good point. I'm going to step out of Proverbs for just a minute. There's a couple of verses in 1 Samuel that I don't know, somehow saw with fresh eyes and kind of blew my mind a little bit. In 1 Samuel 18, I want to spend the last few minutes we got here talking about David and Jonathan and their friendship. And you can just tell Dad that we covered all the verses and all the questions, and we'll all just pretend that happened. So we'll conceal it. We won't conceal it, Nancy. We'll just not tell everything. First Samuel 18. Notice the words here that are used between David and Jonathan. This, by the way, if the book of 1 Samuel is at all chronological, then this is very soon after the episode of David and Goliath. And so David's still very young. He and Jonathan, to our knowledge, haven't had a ton of interaction, and yet we read these verses. Let's first spell, I hope, 1 Samuel 18, 1 through 4. Make care to read those? Not all at once. It'll get too loud in here.
And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day, would not let him go any more home to his father's house. Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and to his girdle.
All right, so there's two things about those verses that I think are fascinating. One, in the very first verse, how does it describe how Jonathan felt about David? Their souls were knitted together. That's pretty fascinating language. And then the end of the verse, loved him like his own soul. All right, hold your finger there and go to 2 Samuel chapter 1 with me. 2 Samuel chapter 1, this is David's kind of lament after the death of Jonathan. 2 Samuel chapter 1, verses 25 and 26. 2 Samuel 1, 25 and 26. Whoever's got it, please. Go ahead.
How are the mighty fallen in the midst of the battle? O Jonathan, thou was slain in thine high places. I am distressed for thee, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant hast thou been unto me. Thy love to me was wonderful, as in the love of women.
Your love to me was extraordinary. Wanda's version says wonderful, surpassing the love of women. Okay? Now, 1 Samuel chapter 23, just the last few verses we'll read. This is a few years on into the story past David and Goliath. 1 Samuel chapter 23, verses 15 through 18. I'll read these for us. 15 through 18, 1 Samuel 23. David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh. And Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David and strengthened his hand in God. Your version may say, encouraged him in the Lord, or encouraged him in God. By the way, that in God's doing a lot of work there. That you talk about why David and Jonathan were knit together. The end of that verse may have something to do with it. And he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father will not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I will be next to you. And Saul my father knows this. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. There's something that verse and our verse in 1 Samuel 18 have in common. Anybody catch it? Covenant. Who said that? Good answer. So, is there such a thing as covenant friendship? Apparently so. I don't think that I'd ever contemplated that. That David and Jonathan had covenant friendship. So what do we think that means? What do you think that covenant that David and Jonathan entered into, it seems first in chapter 18 and then reaffirming it in chapter 23, what does a covenant to a friend look like? It's a commitment, yes. By the way, I will note that if you look up my Hebrew knowledge, right? But that is the same Hebrew word that God talks about his covenant with Noah. This is not like a throwaway word. Like that is a big boy word. That's a serious commitment that David and Jonathan made to one another. Like, if your heart's with God and my heart's with God, we're good. Like, we don't have to have. We're gonna be in this covenant forever. Ooh, that is like in the context of friendship. That is heavy stuff. That is really, really good. So, is there such a thing as a covenant friendship? Yes, David and Jonathan had it. I don't know how many more examples we could find of that. in Scripture, if there are any. But that level of commitment, again, because they were in God, is pretty phenomenal. Because who was Jonathan to the world? What's that? Saul's son. I would know that he's Saul's first son, which to everyone in Israel would have made him what? Crown prince, heir to the throne, next in line. But this covenant with David, this friendship, this love with David was stronger than that political ambition or earthly. That's pretty good. I would also note that David and Jonathan threw around the word love. Like, they just loved each other, and they said it all the time. And so, like, guys, we got to normalize that. That's just the word we got to use. So if we're not comfortable with that, we got to get over it. Like, David and Jonathan are all about it. So anyway, that's pretty good stuff on friendship. Dad will be back. Dad will be back. Generosity and greed. Next time, we'll tackle that topic. Thanks everybody for your thoughts and comments tonight. Very much.